Welcome to The Debate. So I want you to imagine reaching the absolute end of your life. You're lying in your bed, looking at a bank statement with, I don't know, millions of dollars on it, and realizing with total clarity that you committed a massive financial failure.
Which is frankly a terrifying thought, especially for anyone who has spent their entire adult life diligently following, the traditional rules of personal finance.
Exactly. I mean, if you're listening to this right now and you've spent the last 10, 20, maybe 30 years meticulously maxing out your retirement accounts and clipping coupons, hearing that you might be actively wasting your life probably makes you instantly defensive. And it honestly should make you defensive because it challenges the very foundation of how we are taught to view money. Our core question today is this: how should we optimally allocate our financial resources over a lifetime to achieve a life well lived?
Right.
Is the ultimate goal of wealth to deliberately spend it down to zero, to maximize our life experiences before our health declines? Or is the purpose of wealth to build an unbreakable margin of safety against a world that is fundamentally unpredictable?
And this tension is exactly what we are exploring today. It's drawn directly from the friction between two highly influential texts, Bill Perkins' Die with Zero and Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Two incredibly popular frameworks.
Yeah, both books offer brilliant frameworks, but they point you toward completely incompatible destinations.
Well, I am defending Perkins's philosophy today. I argue that we should actively decumulate our wealth. The goal is to maximize your life experiences and your what he calls your memory dividend by finding the exact point where you should stop saving and just start spending your wealth down to zero.
And I am advocating for Housel's philosophy. I argue that extreme, goalless saving is basically essential. You shouldn't be optimizing to die with zero at all. You should be saving simply to ensure survival, to guarantee your independence, and really to create a vital margin of safety against a totally unknowable future.
Okay, so let's establish the fundamental mechanism of my perspective first, which relies on understanding what Perkins calls life energy. Because, every single day you go to work, you are making a trade.
A trade of time for money.
Exactly. You are trading hours of your finite biological existence for paper money. Money's not an end in itself. It has no intrinsic value whatsoever. It is simply a tool.
Right, a medium of exchange.
Yeah, it's like a battery that stores your life energy so you can convert it later into, well, what we might call experience points. And the tragedy here is that people spend their entire lives endlessly charging that battery. They're relentlessly saving for a future self that will eventually be too old, too sick, or just too frail to actually use the power.
Which assumes they won't need that power for, say, medical bills.
But if you die with $1 million in the bank, that means you spent thousands of hours of your peak physical years working for absolutely nothing. I mean, the optimal path is to calculate your net worth peak, that biological intersection where your physical capability meets your financial stability, stop saving, and deliberately spend down to zero.
Okay, but see, you are treating human life like a closed system engineering problem, like it's something that can be perfectly modeled on a spreadsheet.
Because math works.
Math works, sure, but the world doesn't. I look at this entirely differently. The highest dividend that money pays is not an experience. It isn't a vacation to Italy, and it isn't a memory.
Then what is it?
Predictable. When you attempt to perfectly time your spending, when you deliberately throttle your savings to hit a zero balance at the exact moment of your death, you leave yourself profoundly vulnerable to ruin.
Ruin's a strong word.
But it's accurate. Extreme saving, like saving without any specific material goal in mind, is the only logical response to a world that frankly doesn't care about your spreadsheet. It creates the margin of safety required to survive life's inevitable macroeconomic disasters and personal tragedies, all while maintaining your sovereignty. You can't solve life with an equation. You just have to survive it.
Well, survival is the baseline, certainly, but it shouldn't be the ceiling. I mean, let's look at the mechanics of what a dividend actually is in a human life.
Okay,
In traditional finance, a dividend is a regular payout you get from a stock. Perkins introduces the concept of the memory dividend, and we really need to understand the math behind this because it is literally psychological compounding.
Psychological compounding.
Yes. If you spend $5,000 on an incredible, life-altering experience when you were 25, you don't just consume that money, you invest it. For the next 60 years, you draw a yield on that memory, you tell the stories, it shapes your worldview, it builds your relationships.
Right.
If you wait until you are 75 to spend that same $5,000, you only get 10 years of compounding yield.
Look, the math of psychological compounding makes sense in a vacuum, but it completely ignores the psychological cost of financial vulnerability.
But look at the example of Jason from Perkins's text. In his 20s, Jason actually went into debt. He borrowed money from a loan shark to backpack through Europe.
Which is insane.
Traditional finance would absolutely call him an idiot, but Jason acquired priceless experiences. He was sitting in Parisian cafes, taking risks, learning how the world works. Decades later, he is still drawing on those memories. He couldn't have had that same experience at 60.
No, he'd be staying in a nice hotel.
He wouldn't be staying in hostels, staying up all night with other young travelers. The true return on investment of money is maximizing the compounding joy of experiences had at the exact right biological moment.
Jason got lucky. And honestly, survivorship bias makes for great stories. If a recession had hit right after his trip and he couldn't find a job to pay off a literal loan shark, that compounding memory would be entirely eclipsed by compounding stress, wage garnishment, and ruin.
That's a worst-case scenario.
But worst-case scenarios happen. Housel argues that the ultimate dividend of money is waking up in the morning and being able to say, I can do whatever I want today. He uses his own father as a masterclass in this concept.
The ER doctor, right?
Exactly. His father was an ER doctor. That is a grinding, high-stress profession. It requires a brutal toggling of circadian rhythms between day and night shifts. But his father maintained a massive savings rate throughout his career, completely unattached to buying a boat or a second house. He secured his independence.
By hoarding cash.
By building a safety net. So when he decided he had simply had enough of the trauma and the stress, he didn't have to ask a hospital administrator for permission. He didn't have to limp along for 5 more years until his pension vested. He just quit. Total sovereignty over your time is the highest dividend. Optimizing to buy experiences continually depletes the exact asset that buys your freedom.
Freedom to do what, though? I mean, to sit in a paid-off house doing nothing because you're too terrified to spend the money you traded your youth to accumulate?
It's not about doing nothing. It's about having the option.
But this extreme saving for unknown catastrophic future events is exactly what Perkins compares to buying alien robot invasion insurance. You are taking the most vibrant, energetic, biologically capable years of your life, and you are sacrificing them to prepare for a disaster that will likely never materialize.
Alien robot invasion.
Yeah. Why trade your peak years of vitality to build a fortress against a phantom threat?
Oh, come on. Dismissing the unpredictability of life as an alien robot invasion is a total misread of history. We are not talking about phantom threats here. We are talking about stage 4 cancer diagnoses, Alzheimer's, global pandemics, and hyperinflation.
Those are rare extremes, though.
They are real risks. Housel's margin of safety isn't driven by blind, irrational fear. It's driven by a deep respect for historical precedent. When you optimize your life to end exactly at 0, you assume a level of forecasting precision that the universe simply refuses to grant human beings.
But we can forecast.
The illusion of control is the real phantom threat here. On-our-marked savings act as a physical hedge against life's proven ability to surprise the hell out of you.
But you are ignoring the biological reality of how we utilize money. You act as though our capacity to convert wealth into utility just remains static across our entire lifespan.
I don't think it's static, but
The human body does not work that way. Perkins maps this out using time buckets. Think of your life divided into decades. $1 has exponentially more utility to a 45-year-old than it does to an 85-year-old.
depending on what they need it for.
The 45-year-old can use that capital to start a business, hike the Himalayas, or take their children on a really formative trip. The 85-year-old, no matter how many millions they have sitting in their Vanguard account, is biologically constrained. They can't hike the Himalayas. They might not even be able to walk unassisted.
Sure, but
The utility of wealth degrades in lockstep with the degradation of our biological health. If you defer your gratification until traditional retirement age, you are going to find that your physical decline prevents you from enjoying the capital. You traded your life energy for paper that has literally lost its conversion value.
See, you are assuming that the 45-year-old perfectly understands what the 85-year-old will value, and they absolutely do not. This brings us directly to the psychological mechanism Housel warns us about, the end of history illusion.
Oh, the idea that we think we're done evolving?
Exactly. But we really need to look at why that happens. Psychologists have proven that human beings are terrible at predicting how much their values and desires will change in the future.
Oh, sure.
Because it takes actual cognitive effort to imagine a different version of ourselves, our brains just kind of default to this lazy assumption that, well, whoever we are today is the finished final version. A 45-year-old assumes that because they want to hike the Himalayas now, the 85-year-old version of themselves will just be a slightly slower person who still values travel.
They usually do.
But that 85-year-old might undergo a massive shift in values. They might desperately want to fund a grandchild's education. They might want to endow a medical research charity. If you aggressively optimize your spending based on what the 45-year-old thinks is best, you rob the 85-year-old of the flexibility to execute their entirely new set of desires.
Okay, it is difficult to predict our exact psychological desires, I'll grant you that, but we can predict human biology with 100% certainty. We know our physical health will decline. There is no end-of-history illusion regarding the fact that an 85-year-old has less stamina than a 45-year-old.
The decline of stamina is certain, yes, but the specific financial requirements of that decline are totally unpredictable. Let's look at what Perkins's die with zero optimization actually looks like in practice.
It looks like an optimized life.
It is exactly like a pilot flying a commercial airplane across the ocean, calculating the fuel so precisely that the plane has exactly enough fuel to reach the runway and not a single drop more.
Okay.
Now, mathematically, on the spreadsheet, that is brilliant. It's incredibly efficient. You aren't carrying any dead weight. But in the real world, what happens when a thunderstorm hits the destination airport?
You divert.
The runway is closed. Air traffic control forces you to circle for 2 hours. Because you optimized your fuel to hit zero exactly at the runway, your plane crashes into the ocean. Life guarantees that you will be forced to circle the airport. You need extra fuel, not because it's efficient, but because the storm is inevitable.
I mean, the airplane analogy is fundamentally flawed because it treats wealth allocation as a single flight with a binary outcome, land safely or die. But outliving your money is only one type of risk. Dying with millions of unspent dollars is a guaranteed failure of your life's mission.
A failure?
Yes, think about your own analogy. If you land that plane and you have half a tank of fuel left that you can never, ever use, and you sacrifice carrying precious cargo or passengers just so you could hoard that extra fuel, you still failed. You prioritized a fractional probability of risk over a 100% guarantee of wasted life. Extreme saving is often driven more by the psychological comfort of looking at a high score on a bank statement than by any rational lifestyle design.
A high bank balance isn't just an ego boost, though. It's the physical manifestation of options. Marty Housel points out that money not spent is exactly what buys you the flexibility to wait for asymmetric opportunities to fall into your lap.
But you never spend it.
And furthermore, what actually happens to that unspent fuel when you die? It doesn't just evaporate into the ether. It goes to your heirs. It goes to charity. Legacy fundamentally alters the calculation of what constitutes a waste.
See, legacy is exactly where Perkins's logic is the most incisive and where the extreme saving mindset completely falls apart. People constantly use passing it on to the kids as the ultimate rationalization for hoarding wealth until death.
Because they love their kids.
But let's look at the actual data of inheritance. If you live to the statistical average age, say your mid to late 80s, how old are your children when they finally inherit your money? They are in their late 50s or early 60s.
Which is when they might be facing their own medical issues or preparing for retirement.
But they've already lived their entire prime adult's life. I mean, by the time a 60-year-old receives an inheritance, they've already struggled to buy their first house, they've already raised their kids, and they've likely paid off their debts. They are receiving a massive financial windfall at the exact moment their own biological utility is starting to decline.
It's still helpful.
It's wildly inefficient,
If you actually care about maximizing the impact of your wealth on your children, Perkins argues you must deliberately give them their inheritance when they are between the ages of 25 and 35. That is the peak utility zone. That is when capital can actually change the trajectory of a human life. You separate their money from yours, hand it over when they need it most, and then proceed to spend your own remaining wealth down to zero.
Okay. Carving out chunks of your portfolio to give away in your 60s assumes you know precisely how much you will need for the remainder of your wildly unpredictable life.
You can estimate it.
Imagine a parent gives away half their wealth at age 60 to help a 30-year-old child buy a house. Then, at age 75, that parent develops early-onset dementia and requires round-the-clock memory care. Because they optimized for peak utility and gave away their safety net, they bankrupt themselves.
That's a tragic situation, but
Now that 45-year-old child is burdened with the devastating financial and emotional weight of caring for a destitute parent. This is exactly what Housel's strategy avoids.
what is the alternative? Hoarding it forever just in case?
The alternative is adopting what Housel calls a barbelled personality. This is a really crucial concept. To succeed financially, you have to split your psychology into two extreme ends of a spectrum.
Meaning what exactly?
On one end, you must be incredibly optimistic about the long-term future in order to invest your money and let it compound. But on the other end, you must be intensely, almost neurotically paranoid about the short-term shocks that could knock you off your path.
Paranoid?
Yes. On a daily basis, this means aggressively investing in index funds because you believe human innovation will drive the market up over 30 years, while simultaneously keeping an uncomfortably large pile of cash in a basic savings account because you assume you might lose your job tomorrow. Outliving your money isn't just a personal inconvenience. It becomes a profound burden on the very people you were trying to help.
Well, the problem with the barbelled personality is that the paranoid side almost always wins. It ignores the actual data on human spending behavior.
How so?
Federal Reserve data shows that median net worth continues to rise as people get older. People do not smoothly transition from accumulating wealth to decumulating it. They actively continue to grow their wealth right into their 70s and 80s, long past the point of any rational necessity. They suffer from an inability to shift gears because they get addicted to the dopamine hit of saving.
Calling it an addiction kind of pathologizes a perfectly rational desire for security.
It is irrational if it defeats the purpose of the money. This is why Perkins insists that your peak net worth must be a specific date, not a specific dollar amount. Once you hit that intersection of biology and financial independence, you must force yourself to spend.
Force yourself to spend your safety net?
And to address your fear of outliving your money, economics has already solved this with annuities. You buy an annuity to hedge against longevity risk. It mathematically guarantees you will never run out of money if you live to 110. But beyond that exact survival threshold, every single dollar saved is a dollar of life unlived. Yet the data shows people absolutely refuse to buy annuities.
They refuse to buy them because of the annuity puzzle, which perfectly illustrates the flaw in Perkins' spreadsheet mentality. Yes, economists are baffled why people don't buy annuities because mathematically it transfers the longevity risk to an insurance company.
Exactly.
But psychologically, buying an annuity requires handing over a massive lump sum of your capital in exchange for a monthly drip. It feels like a devastating loss of control. If a massive emergency hits, you can't access that capital.
Because you traded it for guaranteed survival.
But you gave up your liquidity. Houser would argue that defining savings merely as deferred consumption is entirely too narrow. You can save just for the sake of saving.
Which makes no sense.
It makes perfect sense. You generate savings by spending less, which you can do if you desire less. You desire less when you stop caring about what other people think of you. Saving is simply the gap between your ego and your income. When people continue to hold wealth into their older years, they aren't suffering from an inability to shift gears. They are existing in a state of profound peace of mind. They have exited the rat race. That peace of mind has a valid, measurable utility that just cannot be matched by forced decumulation.
Well, peace of mind is important, but it isn't the totality of the human experience. I mean, we do not exist on this planet just to safely survive until we quietly expire in our beds. We are meant to process energy, to move through the world, to experience wonder, risk, and connection.
I agree with that.
I agree completely that keeping your ego in check is vital. But if your paranoia about the future prevents you from utilizing the resources you sacrificed decades of your life to accumulate, then the money has basically become your master.
And if your relentless pursuit of maximizing your experience points leaves you destitute and dependent on your children because life threw a macroeconomic curveball you couldn't possibly model in your spreadsheet, then your optimization has led to catastrophe. The world is too messy and human history is too volatile for a perfectly calculated drawdown.
As we pull back from the granular mechanics of our debate, it is really clear how fundamentally different our frameworks are, yet there are some interesting overlaps. Summarizing my position, I always return to the concept of finite life energy. We get one ride. Every single hour you work is a piece of your life you can never reclaim. Deliberate living, carefully planned decumulation, and actively investing in memory dividends prevent the ultimate tragedy, reaching the end of your life with a mountain of unspent paper and a massive deficit of lived experiences.
And summarizing my perspective, the pursuit of experiences must never eclipse the fundamental necessity of survival. Saving without a specific goal is not a waste of life energy. It provides the ultimate psychological peace of mind. It acts as a vital, unbreakable hedge against a future that is entirely unknowable. Time, flexibility, and control are the true currencies of wealth, and a margin of safety is what protects them.
I will say there is a profound point of convergence in our views that listeners should really take to heart. Both Perkins and Housel, and both of us, honestly, completely agree that mindless, status-driven consumption is a psychological trap.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you call it the latte factor or keeping up with the Joneses, blowing your life energy just to impress people who don't care about you is foolish. We both deeply value making deliberate, conscious choices over living on financial autopilot.
That is absolutely true. Where we fundamentally and continually disagree is the nature of the journey itself. You view the ideal financial life as an optimization problem that can be explicitly solved with spreadsheets, biological timelines, and calculated drawdown rates. I view it as a continuous, messy exercise in survival, endurance, and resilience against an unpredictable universe.
And because of the immense depth and complexity of this topic, there is far more to explore in the source material than we could ever cover today. The math of decumulation, the psychology of risk, the philosophy of time. These texts offer brilliant, albeit conflicting maps for navigating our financial lives.
It is a subject that demands serious reflection from anyone trading their finite time for money.
To our listeners, subscribe to Books in Battle, share this debate with a friend, and check the description below for direct links to grab these books or start a free audiobook trial.